A surprising new highway is opening at the top of the world. As summer ice retreats, shipping lanes that were once sealed by centuries of ice are becoming seasonally navigable, triggering a complex geopolitical scramble over trade and sovereignty. First, the basics. Shrinking summer ice shortens sea distances between Asia, Europe, and North America. Reduced transit time lowers fuel use and costs, prompting commercial tests and renewed strategic interest in northern passages. New routes create control points, narrow channels, emerging ports, and patrol zones. Whoever controls these nodes can influence the flow, timing, and security of a growing share of global maritime commerce. Arctic states are upgrading infrastructure rapidly. Russia, Canada, Norway, and the United States build bases, ports, and fleets while diplomats negotiate rights, testing old maritime norms against new realities. Russia emphasizes patrols, ports, and icebreakers along the Northern Sea route. Its investments aim to secure transit corridors and nearby resources, giving Moscow strategic leverage over ships bound between Europe and Asia. Canada and Greenland focus on search and rescue, surveillance, and indigenous rights. Their strategies balance local stewardship, commercial opportunity, and legal claims within adjacent Arctic waters. Norway leverages ports, ice pilots, and scientific research to attract traffic. Deep maritime tradition and nearby infrastructure position Nordic states to become critical hubs for seasonal Arctic commerce. The United States increases icebreaker capacity, surveillance flights, and policy focus. Washington aims to preserve open navigation under international norms and reassure allies concerned about unilateral control. Commercial actors weigh savings against hazards, unpredictable ice, limited response capacity, and rising insurance. Many shipping companies run seasonal trials while insurance markets adjust to Arctic-specific risks. Ports race to build bunkering, repair yards, and connectivity. Small towns face sudden booms and tough choices as heavy equipment, crews, and international investment alter local economies and politics. Environmental stakes are immense. More traffic raises spill risks, black carbon deposition, and noise that disrupts whales and fish, threatening indigenous livelihoods and fragile Arctic ecosystems. Legal frameworks exist but are thin. UNCLOS, bilateral deals, and Arctic Council talks provide guidance, yet presence and investment often determine practical control on the water. Efficiency can become strategic vulnerability. Shorter supply chains concentrate traffic into narrow lanes, creating choke points that can be leveraged during crises or conflicts. Short-term, shippers and Arctic states gain from new routes. Long-term, durable advantage goes to nations combining infrastructure, persistent presence, and cooperative governance to manage risks and rights. Melting ice rewires trade and power. The Arctic becomes a barometer of whether nations build inclusive rules and protections or allow competitive scramble to shape the region. Imagine a route that shaves weeks off Asia-Europe transit. Such savings attract commercial testing, but also spark geopolitical jockeying for control of access, search and rescue, and route governance. Ports, icebreakers, and satellites are instruments of influence. Early investors set standards and secure traffic, so capital deployment becomes a form of soft power in the high north. Russia's billions for northern ports and fleets mix economic aims with military positioning. That hybrid approach seeks to cement Moscow's role as a gatekeeper for northern transit and resource zones. Norway and Canada manage trade-offs between development and sovereignty. Smaller states worry about being squeezed by larger powers bidding for control of emerging lanes and resources. China positions itself as a near-Arctic stakeholder with funding, research ships, and port investments. It seeks influence over routes and standards without claiming Arctic territory directly. Legal ambiguity invites disputes. As passages open, states will contest interpretations of maritime rights, search and rescue obligations, and resource access under evolving conditions. Incidents at sea matter. Groundings, collisions, or contested rescues could escalate into diplomatic crises in a region with limited infrastructure and high strategic stakes. Arctic resources, oil, gas, minerals, fish, offer large potential gains. Extraction is costly and risky, but state-backed firms and investors are drawn by long-term payoff prospects. Environmental debates intensify. Faster shipping and more drilling raise complex trade-offs between economic opportunity and protecting biodiversity, indigenous rights, and global climate goals. Technology changes access. Ice-strengthened ships, advanced forecasting, and satellites reduce uncertainty. Controlling these systems becomes a strategic advantage over rivals and commercial competitors. Alliances will shift beyond Cold War divides. NATO members coordinate Arctic patrols, while non-Arctic states partner on infrastructure and supply chain security, forming new strategic coalitions. Economic winners aren't guaranteed. Weather volatility, insurance spikes, and ecological shocks can make Arctic routes unreliable, tempering commercial enthusiasm despite shorter distances. Local communities will face rapid change. Jobs, services, and infrastructure can arrive, but so can cultural disruption and environmental harm. Indigenous voices must shape any development agenda. Global powers will test legal and political boundaries. The central question: who will write and enforce the rules for navigation, resource access, and environmental protections in these evolving waters? Decisions made today will ripple for generations. Infrastructure, law, and inclusion determine whether the Arctic becomes a zone of cooperative commerce or a contested corridor of strategic rivalry. Shipping companies test seasonal shortcuts to save days per voyage. Those savings alter trade math, but firms remain cautious until safety, insurance, and port reliability reach acceptable levels. Insurance markets adapt. Premiums and underwriting standards will determine which fleets can operate in Arctic lanes, often favoring richer operators backed by state support. Seasonal ports plan year-round operations when feasible. Increased traffic brings construction, workers, and heavy logistics, transforming small towns into strategic maritime hubs overnight. Military planners rethink deployments. Shorter shipping lanes affect force posture, rapid reinforcement possibilities, and vulnerability of supply lines, prompting new patrol and surveillance strategies. Different powers invest in different tools. China funds ports, Europe upgrades satellites, and North America expands icebreaker fleets. These investments quietly reallocate influence across Arctic commerce. Resource competition follows shipping. Easier access to seabed minerals and hydrocarbons intensifies disputes between extractive ambitions, indigenous rights, and fragile ecosystems. Legal gray zones multiply as national claims, exclusive economic zones, and customary practice intersect. Differing interpretations of maps and treaties create recurring diplomatic friction. Multilateral talks intensify, but consensus is fragile. The Arctic Council and other forums can coordinate safety and environmental rules if states prioritize shared interests over unilateral advantage. Public-private partnerships proliferate. Government funding often comes with geopolitical expectations, meaning infrastructure projects can carry strategic strings and shape who benefits from trade. Autonomous shipping, improved ice forecasts, and cleaner fuels reduce some risks, but introduce new questions about standards, cybersecurity, and which nations set technical norms. Local populations face trade-offs: wage jobs and infrastructure versus cultural disruption and environmental harm. Inclusive planning and compensation are essential if development is to be equitable. Activity in the Arctic can accelerate local warming through soot and disturbance. These feedbacks can deepen environmental change, reinforcing the very processes that open the routes. A grounded tanker, a spill, or a disputed rescue could become a diplomatic flashpoint. Limited infrastructure and harsh conditions make accident response slower and stakes much higher. Preventing conflict depends on clear rules, shared monitoring, and joint response plans. Cooperative mechanisms lower the risk of accidental escalation, even amid competitive interests. The Arctic's opening is a governance test. Decisions about infrastructure, law, and indigenous inclusion will decide whether the region becomes cooperative or contested for decades. By 2030, summer sea ice may shrink dramatically, opening routes once sealed for centuries. That prospect concentrates economic, strategic, and environmental stakes into a compressed political timeline. When shippers cut days off Asia-Europe trips, cost savings ripple through supply chains. Those changing economics can alter trade patterns, port hierarchies, and competitive dynamics among carriers. Narrow lanes concentrate traffic into choke points. Ports, icebreakers, and surveillance can turn these corridors into leverage points for coastal states or international coalitions. Major Arctic investments are expensive bets on future influence. Ports, bases, and icebreaker fleets commit capital and political will to shape trade and security outcomes in coming decades. Icebreakers function as mobile sovereignty tools. Escorting commerce, enforcing local rules, and showing presence, these ships serve both practical navigation roles and political signaling. Rising traffic brings emissions, noise, and collision risks that harm marine life. Local hunters and fishers feel these changes acutely, linking ecological damage to social and cultural impacts. Which laws apply in new lanes will be contested. EEZ claims, transit rights, and international standards all collide as navigable waters shift and states reinterpret maps and precedents. Underwriting Arctic voyages determines access. As insurers raise premiums and impose safety rules, only fleets and governments that can absorb higher costs will dominate emerging trade corridors. Small towns may gain jobs and services, yet foreign fleets and industry often bring social strain. Local governance and benefit-sharing frameworks are crucial to avoid exploitation and cultural loss. Military planners anticipate both opportunity and vulnerability. Faster lanes change force movement math, creating incentives for increased patrols, sensors, and forward logistics in the polar theater. Short-term profits and long-term instability collide. Rapid development without safeguards can provoke environmental damage and diplomatic friction that outweigh initial gains. Diplomacy can reduce risks through cooperative frameworks for search and rescue, pollution response, and navigation standards. Shared institutions make accidents less likely to become geopolitical crises. Leadership in Arctic technology matters. Nations that control satellites, ice data, and autonomous vessels gain both commercial advantage and leverage over navigation standards and security operations. Two divergent futures are possible: managed cooperation with shared rules and safe shipping, or fragmented control with rising tensions and accidental crises. Public choices steer which path prevails. Melting ice acts as a catalyst, reshaping trade and geopolitics quietly but steadily. The next decade will reveal who invests, who governs, and whether the Arctic becomes a zone of cooperation or contention.